Thank you for choosing the Burgerball podcast, hosted by Metstradamus blog's John Coppinger and Josh Chapdelaine. Make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. The New York Mets on October 23rd announced Mickey Callaway, the former Cleveland Indians pitching coach, to become their new skipper. After years of the seasoned Terry Collins at the helm of the New York Mets, the second winningest manager in New York Mets history, Callaway will step into a role that will work directly with the front office using an analytical, friendly, leadership-driven approach with an emphasis on love for all of his players that he believes will help drive the kind of results that the New York Mets organization, its fans, and players both expect and want. The kind of vibrant love and energy is something that we haven't seen out of a Mets skipper in at least a decade, or that passion and flair. And that's not necessarily a knock on Terry, so much as it is the fact that Mickey Callaway is in his early 40s and is coming from an organization that has sustained success in recent years. John, you were an advocate for both Callaway and Dusty Baker before the decision was made, but let's start with Callaway. What are your initial impressions on Callaway, and what does he mean for this organization?
Well, Callaway, first off, I love that he started to go into, hey, I read up on my Mets history, and I kind of did the Scooby-Doo, like, it was, I find it fascinating that his brother was named after Casey Stengel, and he was named after Mickey Mantle, and he was telling stories about Casey Stengel, and I'm thinking, who is this guy? This is incredible, and that's when I tweeted. I said, listen, if this managerial thing doesn't work out, he should blog with Greg and Jason from Faith and Fear and Flushing. But it was really a press conference that was just it got everybody excited with his personality. And I think after the Mark Carrig article detailing how Collins had kind of stopped communicating, it portrayed Collins as a guy who doesn't communicate well with everybody on the roster, but only the stars. And I'm not saying how true that is or not, but I think coming off of that, I think Callaway, and I don't know if this was intentional on his part or not, but he came across as that guy that's saying, hey, we love everybody. We're gonna make sure that these players know that we love them, and they're gonna love me back, and they're gonna respect me. That's the thing that keeps ringing in my head for some reason from that whole press conference. We're gonna love these players, and I don't know what effect that's going to have short term or long term, but I do think that the players who were concerned about Collins's waning communication skills are going to be really excited to have this change. And whether that's going to come through in their performance or not, who knows? But I think it's something, listen, this represents a hire for the Mets that nobody thought that they would do. It was, and it's so weird to have the Mets or any team hire the unknown out of a group and have everybody be excited about it. But I think that's what this team needs. I think when you talk about, like, say, Kevin Long, for instance, Kevin Long is in a very similar situation to Mickey Callaway, except he's a little bit older, and he's actually had managerial experience. But the thing that always worries me about coaches that elevate to the manager is that your communication skills as a coach aren't going to be the same as they are with when you're a manager. That's you've got to play the bad cop sometimes as a manager. So what players would have been used to with Kevin Long wouldn't have necessarily translated if Long was promoted. Buddy Harrelson went through the same thing when he took over for Davey Johnson in 1990. And Davey was known as a guy to just let players play, and it's like, only has two rules: show up on time and hustle when you're on the field. And Harrelson, when he was the coach, was known as a good communicator, a likable guy. But when he took the job, his first order of business was, I'm going to instill discipline. I think we're going to go back to this and that. And the players on that team, I don't think they responded initially. They played very well at the end of 1990, but then that kind of act wears thin, and it wore thin very quickly with Harrelson. And I think my opinion is because they were not used to Harrelson being who he was as a manager in contrast to who he was as a coach. And I think when you talk about Kevin Long, I think a similar change would have had to have taken place with Long. So I don't know if that would have worked. I think it works with Callaway because this roster has no frame of reference with Callaway as a coach. They'll only know Callaway the manager. So Callaway comes in with a clean slate and can basically do what he wants, and it's not going to throw off the team because, again, they've got no frame of reference from the Mickey Callaway, who was the pitching coach with Cleveland. So that's why I think it works on that level.
The negative side, and maybe one of the only negative sides, and it may not turn out to be a negative, is the fact that Kevin Long is now seeking opportunity elsewhere. And he's been a phenomenal hitting coach. He helped turn around Murphy. He's really worked with some players. And a lot of players, even Kelly Johnson, have credited him with coming and really being able to identify the weakness in a player, to be able to work with them in a respectful, logical manner. And it seemed in a lot of ways that he was helping to lead the offense, which at times was not great, but really did help to reinvent some players. And on the heels of the Callaway managerial decision, Long is set to interview with the Washington Nationals. And we're going to get to this in a second because this is a longer discussion. But this is going to open up another narrative and storyline for the Mets one way or another. Because the least likely scenario is now that Long stays with the Mets. He probably feels a little bit snubbed and a little bit awkward. And so if he goes to the Nationals and becomes their new manager, that's one thing. He's reunited with Daniel Murphy. He gets to head an organization that, in his opinion, is the antithesis, the more successful version of the one that he was just at the helm of. Or there's another opening in New York, and I think this is the biggest thing. Joe Girardi, it was announced, will not have his contract renewed by the New York Yankees. So for the first time in a decade, the Yankees will have a new manager. Cashman opted not to continue using Long in the hitting coach role several years ago. But now that Long is advanced to being a manager, he's analytically inclined. He's familiar with the Yankees. Brett Gardner and several other Yankees, including CC Sabathia, have already come out and voiced their opinion for Long being promoted to a managerial role. If he doesn't stay with the Mets and if he doesn't get the Nationals role, he could also be a fit with the Yankees, no?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think it's very weird what's happening in the Bronx because you would think that a manager who is consistently overachieved with average rosters and then gets this talented roster in a rebuilding year to within one game of the World Series, you would think that they would have a job for life.
Right.
And I do think that Girardi will when it's all said and done, he'll be one of the most underappreciated managers in Yankees history because he had to go through a time where they weren't spending every single year. They weren't getting these big contracts, these big players, and he didn't have, and it wasn't until the end where he had his version of the core four in terms of young players rising through the system and finally grabbing hold of the opportunity and becoming productive players. You know, Girardi has had a very interesting, he was dealt a very interesting hand, an un-Yankee-like hand. And he did as well as you could have hoped for with that hand. And it seems cruel that now that they're ready to take that next step and go farther and go to the World Series and win World Series or maybe win 2 World Series, that Girardi is now out. But it's what we talk about all the time here too. Certain managers can get teams to a certain point. Like he can take an average team and make it a good team and make it a great team. But is he that guy to take that team and make it a championship team? And 2009 was basically he won with Torrey's team, and I think he could have won with this team. But what Brian Cashman is basically saying is, we don't think that he's that guy. He's that fit with this team. Because remember, when he won in 2009, he played with a lot of those players.
He did.
That won in 2009. So you had that connection. There isn't that connection with this team from a cultural standpoint. So maybe, they're talking about going younger. It almost seems like they want to go younger for the sake of going younger, having somebody that can connect with these players and somebody that can relax a little bit. Because that was the knock against Girardi, that he was just way too intense when he didn't need to be. He couldn't turn off that switch. So now they're talking about guys. They're talking about a guy named Reggie Willits, who was a pinch runner with and a spare outfielder with the Angels. He's 36 years old. So you're talking about they could really go young and really have somebody who's had a history with these particular players. I think it's very interesting to see. And I think with the Yankees, it'll be the same with the Mets. They won't have the frame of reference with Kevin Long as the Mets hitting coach. Now, some of them have the frame of reference from him as the Yankees hitting coach, so it's a little different. But for Long to come in as a manager, at least there's a little bit of that break. So it could definitely work. But I also get the sense that the Yankees want to stay somewhat in-house and stay somewhat with a guy who's been in the organization and has dealt with these players before. So you're talking like Willits, like Josh Paul, even Eric Chavez, who was a special advisor for a couple of seasons as a dark horse candidate, former Met J. Bell, who's been with the organization as a lower level manager, that maybe he could be that guy. So I think it's very, very interesting to see who they're going to pick, because it'll tell you. I think who they pick will tell you what the problem was with Girardi.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting moving forward, but especially if they go the route of a Kevin Long. But the interesting part about Girardi connecting it back to New York is that a lot of the initial excitement from the New York Mets hiring Callaway was done away when the Yankees announced that Girardi would not be returning. And I have a friend who personally texted me and said he was really excited about Callaway coming on to the Mets. Yesterday afternoon, he texts me and says, the Mets screwed up. They should have waited if they knew Girardi wasn't going to be here. Why did the Mets not pursue Girardi?
And I've had friends that have that even before that said that they're going to make a decision too quick and then Girardi's going to quit. And had that play out. But let's put it this way though, if the reasons that the Yankees let Girardi go seem to be true, that he was way too intense, then would he have been a good fit for the Mets? Would he have been a good fit for this roster, considering what they just went through with Terry Collins? And not that Terry Collins was intense, but it didn't seem at the end that roster was relaxed. So I think you need a relaxed roster at this point. So maybe Callaway will turn out to be the right type of manager for this team. Even if he's not the right manager, he's the right type of manager. Now, I wonder if Callaway would dare hire Girardi as his bench coach, if Girardi wanted to stay in the game and not have the rigors of being a manager, have those extra responsibilities. I wouldn't put the odds very high of that. I think Callaway would do it because he's very confident in himself and he's not scared of having strong personalities to lean on and take their temperature on things. But Girardi, I think it's going to be one or the other. I think it's going to be he's going to take a year off or he's going to take that Nationals job.
And I think those are the two logical landing points for Girardi this season. And the Mets are in an interesting situation right now. The last time the Mets made a managerial change, it was Terry Collins, obviously, and he lasted long enough to become the second winningest manager in New York Mets history. He was the manager for the entire duration of the Sandy Alderson era. Honestly, we talked about Terry's departure 2 weeks ago, but it's something that now it makes things a little bit less clear and also more clear. And we talked about something that we thought would be interesting. Would the Mets' managerial choice shape the offseason, or would their offseason plan shape their managerial choice? And it just seemed they chose someone that fit their overall organizational philosophy. There were a lot of rumors of someone like a Manny Acta coming in, who's gained more notoriety over the course of the past several years as building himself up. But do you think that in the grand scope of things that there's any chance that people are going to look back on this period of Mets history and say that this was a risk that the Mets didn't need to take and that they rushed the market as opposed to the market dictating them?
Oh, I think definitely. First off, because we look back with hindsight on everything, so I think there's definitely a chance that that's going to happen. And Callaway's performance is going to dictate that for sure. And when you look at rushing the market, they've done that with players. They did that with Chris Young. They signed Chris Young right away and didn't let the market come back to them on a guy like Nelson Cruz. And people still complain about that. And there are other people that say, well, that was right because Cruz can't play the outfield anyway, and he wasn't a National League player. But yeah, it seems to be something that they've done a lot. They get their shopping done early, and they don't wait for the big ticket items to come to them. So I definitely think that there's a chance if Callaway comes in and bombs, that people will look back and say, oh well, they could have waited and maybe went after Joe Girardi when he was available. And it's a valid concern for sure. But like I said, I think it's a little bit schizo that people really love Callaway's opening press conference, but then can be so swayed the other way by saying, oh, well, Girardi's available.
Right.
It's weird. I don't even know what to think about that. I mean, I'm still excited about having Callaway here. I think that he's gonna change a lot of people's minds. I think that he will bring some energy to this team, and I don't know if this roster could handle somebody as intense as Joe Girardi. Maybe it's exactly what they need. You look at the individual players that could use somebody that's intense and really puts them in the line. You look at a guy like Matt Harvey. What would Matt Harvey benefit more from having Callaway's experience as a pitching coach, or would he benefit more by having a guy that's intense, that's going to smack him around a little bit and say, hey, wake up, like Joe Girardi? We don't know that. We don't know which direction that's all gonna take. But we're Mets fans, so we'll always expect the worst.
I think you brought up a great point there. And talking about Matt Harvey, it also brought to mind Noah Syndergaard. And knowing that Syndergaard has a reputation, not saying that he is, but the reputation is that he has a bit of an ego, that he's a little bit young still in terms of mind frame. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. It's to say that he's a 24-year-old living in New York City and he's a celebrity. And he's got that Texan in him too, so that's also a factor in that. Absolutely. But when you have personalities like that who are a little bit goofy, who and with Harvey, who are also intense, you want someone that can kind of relate to you. And I feel like when you take a look at people like Syndergaard and Harvey, they might be hard enough on themselves. And they might need someone that's a little bit more relatable, pat on the backy, saying, hey, you really didn't do a good job. Here's why, but don't worry about him. Go get him. We still respect you. I think you're right. Maybe there's two. And that's what Callaway's talking about in his opening press conference. We're going to love them. Yeah. And I really love the fact, but it was a little bit interesting. He said, we're not really going to look at the numbers. He said, we're going to look at the preparation, the effort, and we'll worry about the numbers after. But as long as you're doing everything the right way, then that's okay. But that presented an interesting thing because that's not a results-based business. That's a preparation-based business. And I think he anticipates that the preparation will lead to the results. But if Harvey, who this year was probably doing everything he could, was not getting the results, I don't think he meant that they would remain on the team. But did you get a sense that maybe there was a little bit too much optimism and youthful joyness and maybe naivety in this approach? Or do you think that that's just something that they're going to preach as an organization, maybe having a longer leash with players that struggle, as they did with Reyes this year? Well, it's an interesting question, and it's tough to
glean an entire organizational philosophy from just an introductory press conference where he talked in general terms. So it's weird, managers in any walk of life, the good managers will treat everybody as their own person and understand the needs of that person in conjunction with the needs of your company or your organization or your baseball team. And I think that will be the key to Callaway's success. Will he, and not so much different rules for different players, but understanding who needs the kick, who needs the pat, who needs the TLC, and understanding what drives each player individually and not paint everybody with a broad stroke. That I think not only will it tell you how successful Callaway will be, but that's a hallmark of a good manager anywhere. Understanding your personnel on a level that they're comfortable with, and not just the level that you're comfortable with.
Ultimately, we're seeing a shift in Major League Baseball, and you see some organizations like the Mets moving toward this mentorship managerial role where they're acting as surrogates for the front office and really just managing the personalities as opposed to the everyday day-to-day roster construction and configuration where you assume that most of that is coming from Alderson and Rico at this point. But and the fact that he learned under Francona, and you see these types of managers with Joe Maddon, who he's been oft compared to at this point. And then you take a look at someone like Girardi, and who's a little bit more old school in his approach and is successful in what he does, and maybe had too much expressive nature when he threw Gary Sanchez under the bus because he couldn't defend his position with the kind of credibility that he needed to in the postseason for the Yankees to be successful. And you mentioned that this might be a little bit of a sign of his departure. So do you think that a manager's quintessential role in 2017 is essentially acting as the babysitter and a friend? Or do you think that moving forward that there's going to be more of an infusion of that analytical approach as well? Because it seems like there's a hybrid right now, but it seems like everything is kind of evolving, and I don't think millennials will kill this too.
I think it has to be a hybrid. You have to know your personnel, and you have to know what makes them tick on a personal level. But you also need to learn from the data that you have. It's the example I bring up over and over again. Hansel Robles, much better against left-handed batters than right-handed batters. Yet Terry Collins couldn't seem to get that block out of his head of lefty-righty matchups. And it was only at the very end when he realized, when he actually said, hey, Hansel Robles is better against left-handed batters. Oh, eureka! How long did it take you to figure that out? And you only said it when it was clear that this was going to be your last few weeks as the Mets manager. It makes you want to bash your head against the wall. I do think that there has to be some sort of hybrid, and I do think that managers need to have a little more leeway in terms of that. The talk even last night after during the off day when I was listening to MLB Network, they were talking about how the role of a manager has changed, and basically a manager is just a middle manager at this point, and it's the front office people that are running things. And I do think that that's all part of the evolution of the game with all these advanced statistics and data. But I do think that a manager should have some sort of leeway in terms of how he uses that data and how he constructs a lineup on a given day when a player isn't feeling all that well, or feeling all that well emotionally, or needs a day off. Sometimes players need days off where on a day where the lineup is optimal with them in it. Every once in that I think is the challenge of a 162 game season. It can't just be robots. You're not dealing with robots. You're not dealing with fantasy games. You're not dealing with clutch baseball. You're not dealing with dice and cards. You're dealing with human beings. And I think that as long as managers get a little more leeway in that and kind of gain some of that responsibility back that they had in the old days, I think it would be better for everybody.
I'm with you on that. I'm completely with you on that. And there's so much going
and
on.
I'm not saying stop evolution either. I'm not saying the evolution of the game needs to stop. I'm just saying that there are some babies that have been thrown out with the bathwater. That's all.
And you have to kind of integrate those babies back into the bath because there are some good aspects to all of that. You were an advocate for Dusty Baker coming onto the Mets organization, so I was curious why you thought he would have been a good fit.
Well, Dusty, wherever he's gone, has improved the win totals of the teams that he has gone by an average of 18 wins. And Dusty's moves sometimes confound you, but I think Dusty is a perfect example of what we were saying about dealing with people on a personal level. Dusty knows how to do that, and it's obvious in the results. His track record in October isn't very good, but my whole thing was, look, could have done a lot worse than Dusty Baker, and that's in all deference to the hire, Mickey Callaway. I think he's going to turn out to be the right person for the job, or at least the right hire at this time. But, I just thought for people to eliminate Dusty out of hand was kind of, it's just weird. It's like, okay, well, Dusty's not good in October. Dusty has managed in the playoffs, lost multiple times when he's had the better team. And that's true. But you know what? Besides 2015 and 2016, we had 5-6 seasons with Terry Collins where he's won between 70 and 80 games. I'd kill for a team to lose in October at this point.
Get to the show.
I just want to get back to October, and it's more of a defense of Dusty Baker in terms of why he was fired from Washington when I don't think that he was the problem in Washington. I think the narrative of him killing pitchers is gone. His usage of Strasburg and Scherzer went down by an average of 4 pitches a game from Dusty's first year to Dusty's second year. And I think if Dusty did have any problems, it was because he pulled guys too soon. He pulled Scherzer too soon in game 3. But then he went back with him. He did it because he was thinking ahead. I think he was thinking ahead to game 5, where he thought he might need Scherzer. And he did need Scherzer. And he had brought Scherzer in the 5th inning. And guess what? Scherzer didn't get it done.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a byproduct of Dusty's decision-making or just a byproduct of, at a certain point, your players just have to perform for you. And the Nationals have had multiple managers lead that team to the playoffs, the first round of 90 wins in the first round of the playoffs, and the players didn't get it done.
And it's so random. It's so random in a 5-game series to be able to come out on top. And here's the thing. They've lost to the
You can't account for Drew Storen giving up a 3-run double to Pete Kozma. You can't account for that.
You can't. And you can't account for constantly running into the team or teams that are dynastic. And it's not to say that the Nationals can't or shouldn't be dynastic, but it's like they keep running into freight trains. And when you run into the Cubs and when you run into the Dodgers, you're up against the most analytically advanced teams with the most prestigious front offices, the most resources, and the best construction. And the Nationals are in a weird spot because they're really well constructed, but I don't think they're in that level of prestigious that the other organizations are. And that's not because of their front office, and it's not necessarily because of their winning. It's just that those other teams have continued to set the bar for excellence, and they have not been able to do so. They keep scapegoating the manager. I mean, they went from Davey, they went and their managers just to Brian Williams. It just doesn't get
Matt Williams.
Matt Williams.
Well, Matt Williams was a little shaky. I kind of got Matt Williams because Matt Williams was consistently outmanaged by Terry Collins.
He was, and that's saying something. That's saying something to be outmanaged and outmaneuvered. But I mean, the front office is also not necessarily the most cognizant with identifying the organizational needs, the player needs. Acquiring Papelbon stands out as a huge knock against the organization when everything was going right.
And now you brought that up, I do want to say, Dusty had to take over with a locker room that was a mess
Yes.
after Papelbon got through with it. And he led that team to 95 and 97 wins. That's got to count for something.
I mean, to accrue 180 wins or 180 and change over the course of 2 seasons is just phenomenal. And the fact that you see Baker leaving and you see Farrell leaving in Boston and you see Girardi on the outs, there's this shift in baseball. And I think all three of those guys should have jobs. But where are they going? There aren't enough jobs. And I think with someone like Girardi, he can afford a year off. Farrell maybe doesn't want the year off. Maybe he wants it for personal reasons, for his health. Baker, he doesn't have that much longer to manage if he wants to keep managing. So,
right.
And do the Yankees look to someone like Baker? Do they think he's the guy to get them over the hump? I mean,
no, probably not. I think there would be a riot if they replaced Girardi with Baker, because basically you're going, you're bringing back the same type of person. You fire Girardi because he's too old, or you let Girardi go because he's too old, and then you bring somebody in who's 71 years old. I don't think that would fly for the Yankees. But with Girardi, it's interesting because, like you said, you've got 2 jobs out there now. Well, 3, but for Girardi, it's 2 jobs. You got the Nationals and the Phillies. The Nationals makes a lot of sense for him. And I was talking to somebody last night who reminded me and said, listen, you look at if Girardi decides, okay, I'm burnt out, I want to take a year off, you can do that. But tell me what high-profile, prestigious job has a chance to be out there in 2019.
That maybe one that you can't predict. Maybe,
you're talking because the Yankees' job will be gone. The Mets' job, they're not gonna, unless Callaway throws puppies off a roof, that job is gonna be his. They're not gonna be looking for a manager. Joe Maddon's gonna be in Chicago for as long as he wants that job. Dave Roberts is gonna be in LA, I think, for a long time. You look at the prestigious, the who else? The Nationals' job and the Phillies' job will be taken. Yankees' job won't be out there, obviously. What are the other prestigious jobs in baseball? Tigers just hired Ron Gardenhire.
They did.
So there's not going to be a lot of options for him to come back after 1 year if Girardi decides to go that route. And that's why I think the Nationals makes a lot of sense for him.
The only other job or organization I could see, maybe they look to replace Cash down in Tampa Bay if things aren't going well, maybe, but I don't think.
But it's Tampa Bay,
I don't think Tampa Bay's not.
It's just job. Though.
No, it's not at all. Don't get me wrong. And the only way that I could.
Great organization, but not. Are they that high profile job? And would that do it for Girardi? Or the Red Sox also. The Red Sox just hired Alex Cora.
Right. There's no wiggle room here, so he may have to jump into something even if he's not ready. I mean, maybe something opens up. Maybe the relationship between Mattingly and Jeter isn't what they hope it is, and then there's a logical connection to bring at least Girardi into the organization, or maybe he's in the organization already. Maybe that's his next move. Maybe he goes to Miami and reconnects with Jeter and
a special advisor or something.
Yeah, or just keeping himself.
It could be. See, I thought it would be deliciously evil if Alex Cora hired Girardi to be his bench coach in Boston.
That's spoopy.
I mean, they've just lost a couple of. I think they just lost 3 coaches too.
Yeah, and I mean there are a platitude of coaching jobs available right now. I mean, in the Mets organization alone, it looks like they're going to lose Long, and they're going to lose, and they have to replace the pitching, and they have to replace Worthen. So
they were talking about Tim Tuffle perhaps coming back.
Yeah, and that would be interesting as well. I mean, that's not necessarily a revolutionary move, but he seems like he's going to be a guy that's shuffling in and out of the organization for quite a while. So,
yeah, one of those, yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
But I'd like to see Tuffle as a bench coach. I'd like to see Tuffle get a job as a manager if he wants it.
And he was kind of in the discussions to replace Collins, I think, a few years ago, but not any longer. So, yeah, you're right. I think, I mean, maybe Girardi wants to take it more relaxed and go out to a place like San Diego. It's not necessarily like a a prestigious job. Maybe the Mariners have an opening, but again, not that prestige and not that level. It's Girardi's dream job to manage the Cubs. Maybe in a few years when Madden is ready to step down, that job becomes available. But like you said, he's going to have a rough time.
And would he at all consider, as something else my friend told me, would he at all consider the White Sox? And that's not the prestige of the Cubs, but that's a job that could open up in a year and he'd go back to Chicago. So that might be the only other seamless fit for him if he wants to lay low for a year, and then that's where he comes back.
That seems like the logical opening, and it seems like Girardi is going to be a story that's going to preside over winter. The Phillies, too, have not yet, I don't think, had a connection to him, but they would be really silly not to at least have a conversation and engage in some kind of dialogue with him. So
yeah, they've got an up-and-coming roster. That might, that maybe Girardi wants to prove, hey, I can work with a young roster. Look what I do with the Phillies. Who knows?
Yeah. And where Stanton lands could be a big thing. If Stanton lands with the Phillies or if Stanton lands with the Giants, that could be a big swayer. I think if he goes to a team like Philly, then they might be more inclined to invest in someone like Girardi, who's used to winning and can help transition that clubhouse to have that mentality. If he goes to a place like San Francisco, then I think the odds of him landing in a place like Philadelphia might be decreased. And by the way, is there any doubt that Jason Worth is going to sign a 1-year deal with the Phillies as that veteran leadership to return and finish his career?
That's a good point, and that would not surprise me one bit.
Yeah, he finished up.
They're always looking for somebody like that, right? They're always looking for somebody that not only could bring some veteran leadership, but somebody they could possibly wheel at the deadline for a minor leaguer or two if the Phillies don't contend. That's what they did with the pitcher who I can't think of his name.
Burnett.
Jeremy Hellickson.
Oh, yeah, Hellickson. I was thinking Burnett when they dealt him back to the Pirates a few years ago. So
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I there's some interesting stuff going on here, but ultimately it seems the Mets made a really solid call with hiring Mickey Callaway, at least at the outset. I don't think they should regret anything.
I wonder, I think that Callaway's choices for his staff are going to be paramount. And I wonder if Callaway is going to go out of the box and bring somebody in with any sort of experience. Because that's the thing about Callaway that everybody talks about, is that he's not afraid to bring in, to listen to other voices. So I wonder if now bringing in Girardi to be his bench coach might create somewhat of a circus that he doesn't need. But I wonder if he's going to bring in some people with experience, somebody to be a really strong bench coach to make sure that he's making the right moves at the right time, that he's warming up the right pitcher at the right time, that he thinks of things like this. I think it's going to be paramount for him to hire the right bench coach. And I think that will make or break his tenure with the Mets.
I'm with you. And I think we'll also see how much power and control Alderson and Callaway have, who I think are on the same page, versus Fred and Jeff Wilpon. And not to create like that division within the organization, but if we magically see Robin Ventura and John Franco emerge as coaches on this team, I'm going to be like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
If they go, if they look to more of those nostalgic picks, I'm going to be a little bit curious as to what's going on. I hope they're outside of the box, or at least.
And that's another reason why I'm glad that Callaway's the manager, because that there's no doubt that this wasn't a marketing hire.
Right. This is an organizational hire.
There's no doubt about that. If they had hired Ventura or Joe McEwing, there always would have been that voice in the back of your head saying, why exactly did they hire him? Is it because they were the most qualified, or was there part of them that wanted to? Was this part of a decision by the ticket office, perhaps?
Probably the latter, or at least a significant contributing factor to it. So,
sure.
Yeah. So, that being said, last week we plugged the Umami Burger, which is helping hurricane relief efforts through donations for their trio.
Yes.
I'm not sure. You did mention that you were going to head out and try it. I don't think you got to it, but did you have another show burger?
I went last night, but I didn't see the Impossible Trio,
No.
so I just had a regular burger.
Oh, you got another one. or the
Yeah, I
same?
did. Well, I got the same one that I got the Manly Burger, but I did try the truffle fries for the first time, and they're very, very good.
Are they really? Are they standard
Yes,
or?
they're thin. They're thin cut, which I really like.
Okay. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And
So, but I didn't see the impossible. I didn't see the impossible trio. But one of these days, I will. I'll maybe I'll ask about it. But I
maybe
didn't see it on the menu. So
that's interesting and slightly upsetting. Maybe it was a limited
yeah,
time promotion. And actually,
yeah, maybe it was in just certain locations.
yeah, and Will Smith's son, Jaden Smith, actually created that trio. So
Oh, okay.
that's just a fun fact. I think they did a cross promotion with that. So yeah, that being said, where can everyone find you in the interim?
Well, you can find me at Metstradamus on Twitter and metstradamusblog.com on the internet. And also Sunday evenings on 5:40 a.m. At 7 o'clock, WLIE. I do the baseball report there for 5 or 10 minute spot, depending on what's going on. And that's pretty much where you could find me. I also want to throw in this. I tried the buttermilk chicken strips at McDonald's.
Okay. First time?
They're very good. For the first time.
The chicken selects, you mean?
Yeah, well, they used to be called the chicken selects.
Oh,
but they got rid of those a while ago. So now they've been trying to have like a solid chicken strip option at McDonald's, and I think they finally done it. These buttermilk chicken strips are very, very good.
That's awesome. And did you happen to get any of the Szechuan sauce or no?
No, I think I just got the sweet and sour sauce. I don't think they presented that to me as an option.
I'm curious. Are you familiar with this? Can I introduce you to some millennial jargon?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, so Szechuan sauce off the tip of my tongue and into the precipice of your brain. What does that ring a bell? Does it ring a bell?
That's like an Asian style flavor.
Okay, correct. But do you know what it's from?
No.
Okay, so in the late 1990s, McDonald's did a cross promotion with Disney's Mulan, the animated film, and they released a limited time offer called Szechuan sauce. And by all accounts, it was a good sauce, if not, not extraordinary or anything like that. But earlier this year on April Fool's, there was a popular cartoon, and I would say cult-based fan base of a show called Rick and Morty. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
I have seen Rick and Morty, and I was shocked to find out that the parents were divorced, that Morty's parents are divorced now.
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. I think
that's what happens when you watch a recent episode without watching the 3 or 4 that preceded them.
Yeah, and typically cartoons are linear, but not necessarily so, right? They're like the structure stays the same with family.
Right, yeah.
That's interesting. So yeah, I didn't know about that. On April 1st this year, I think it was like a 2-year break in between seasons. They wanted to get it perfect. Morty, wait, okay, which is the scientist? Because I don't watch the show. I just know the context of
Rick is the scientist. Morty is the kid.
Okay, so Rick was on a quest to find his Szechuan sauce. He was obsessed. It was like his secret, or it was a reward or something like that they produced for a limited time. Now they dropped this and they said, I need my Szechuan sauce, Morty. And that was the crux of the episode. Now Rick and Morty's fan base took this to the next level and made it viral and started writing McDonald's and getting Szechuan sauce trending, and to the point where McDonald's needed to respond, and they produced 3 gallons of it and sent it to, I think, the show's creator and then 2 other people. Now this led to an even further demand to get it into stores. So 2 Saturdays ago, they had a limited run of Szechuan sauce, and you could find the locations where it was available on the McDonald's website, and they said limited run with posters. So they sent it out, and now that you mention it, they released it in conjunction with the new buttermilk tenders. So this was a promotion, and people were lined up outside of McDonald's for hours. They released them at 2 p.m. that day as a part of their special promotion when they got everything.
Wow.
And so people were lined up for hours to try this sauce. And it's a terrifying look at the philosophy and the cult fandom of this show, because when people got in and they were sold out, there are people jumping on the counters, not even exaggerating with this, yelling, "Where's my Szechuan sauce?" and trying to mimic the show. It got crazy. And here's the thing.
Meanwhile, a couple of weeks earlier, these people didn't even know that they wanted Szechuan sauce.
Exactly. And to end this all, McDonald's only sent each location, after advertising it nationally, with 20 packets of this sauce. So,
oh my God.
So people that anything longer than 20 packets, if you go on eBay, you can buy it for $200 to $300 per packet if you were lucky enough.
See, and that's the thing now. It's like these are collector's items, so you're going to keep Szechuan sauce now because you can't eat it because this is a Rick and Morty collectible.
Yeah, and so this demand.
Listen, I collect a lot of things, but wow, food.
Food packets. And so this demand led to a boycott McDonald's campaign. It led to it led to all of this stuff. So now McDonald's is like, okay, we'll bring Szechuan sauce back on a limited basis to some locations, and we'll do it again to appease. But they had to respond to 5,000 to 10,000 rabid people who showed up to the stores and caused disturbances. So that's millennial culture.
And so, well, I think it's also marketing culture.
That's a really
that's marketing culture, and it's viral marketing culture.
It's upsetting.
I was joking around with somebody the other night. That was saying, you see, you're a good capitalist because you see something on television in a commercial and you immediately want it. You're easily influenced.
Yeah,
and I was joking, but people are. People will say, "Oh, you know what?" People who haven't eaten Szechuan sauce, haven't even thought about Szechuan sauce in years. All of a sudden, they get this unlocked in them. Like, oh my God, I have to have Szechuan sauce now. I didn't know I wanted it, but I need it, and I have to have it.
And I don't know why I want it. I just know that they said it on my favorite show, and I think it's funny, and I need to go buy it.
Yeah, and the people, the marketers that understand this are the most successful because they create these campaigns and they create these hashtags, and then all of a sudden you got people climbing on the counters at McDonald's saying, "Give me my Szechuan sauce."
And I'll send you that video, by the way. He hops on the counter and he pulls his shirt over his head. And I didn't see the episode, so I'm sorry I don't understand the full context. Apparently, Rick turns himself into a pickle, and he becomes Pickle Rick. And so he pulls his shirt.
I've seen the commercial for that, but not the entire episode.
So he pulls his shirt over his head. And he jumps from the counter to the ground and starts having a fake seizure and just says, "I'm Pickle Rick, I'm Pickle Rick, I'm Pickle Rick," and then runs out of the McDonald's while there's families and children terrified watching this man. Terrified watching this guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Get me off this planet, please.
Well, I think Rick and Morty might be able to help you with that.
They might. They might
if they have their way. So, the point of that was, the buttermilk tenders are awesome, at least, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a solid.
Very
plug.
Awesome.
that's incredible.
And the next thing to try is that I got to try are the spicy chicken nuggets at Burger King.
Ooh, I heard those were good.
And I heard they were good too. And speaking of that, speaking of marketing, you had Burger King on Twitter basically responding to random Twitter accounts complaining to Wendy's that they no longer have spicy nuggets, and Burger King was responding to all these people saying, "Hey, we got new spicy nuggets too."
That's so brilliant, though. That the whole digital marketing landscape is just this weird world, but it's fun. It's fun.
It's fun, and in certain cases, it works.
Yeah. Did you see? I mean, like, even in the case of what KFC is doing right now, have you seen who KFC follows on Twitter?
Yes, I did see that. 5 Spice Girls and six guys named Herb.
How brilliant!
So they follow 11 herbs and spices, which is great.
It's a built-in marketing campaign. It's brilliant. And then they also have their new Nashville hot, spicy, smoky, crispy chicken. I didn't know it could be smoky, spicy, and crispy, but that's brilliant. And
I guess if you can do it, then go for it, man.
And they have that cross promotion with WWE where they're having the WWE wrestlers try out to be the new Colonel and it's all over the world, man. There's nothing that isn't interconnected. Yeah, there's nothing that isn't interconnected. And I just like to point out, we started this with talking about how Omar Minaya signed on the origin of species, and we're ending with Szechuan sauce and KFC and digital marketing. You're the best.
Yes, you won't get this in any other podcast.
No, and this kind of nonsense, and
I don't know if that's a good thing, but
hey, I mean, we're completely rebranded and we have integrated nonsense into the tagline, so I think it's okay.
There you go. Nonsense.
I think it was
not heavy on the nonsense and the Szechuan sauce.
I think that's the name of this episode. Heavy on the nonsense and Szechuan sauce.
That's it. I like it.
We will be back in 1 week to discuss Carlos Beltran, the World Series fallout, and the beginning of the New York Mets offseason. Thank you so much for joining us on the Burgerball podcast, and we hope you have a great week.